Hello everyone. My name is Kolatat Phaiboonnukulkij. I'm working, and today I'm going to have a talk about the climate change, extreme weather, and how satellite going to play a very pivotal role in that. So today we have to understand our contextual and situation that we are facing right now in the region. So today, in the past 2 decades, we are facing over 1,500 disasters. And we're talking about that amount of challenge, then there's a certain capacity that we have to working to be able to achieve a climate adaptation and also resilient planning in the long run as well. So today, I would say 100% of city, we're talking about more than 1 million people, all of them have faced a climate hazard event in their challenge into that. And one of the most of them is 80% is including in flooding, drought, heat, Wi-Fi, and other aspects. And including today, this frequency, intensity, and severity is going to increase double to triple to 4 times amount of that. And today, when we're talking about data, we have a certain challenge to that. We're going to see it later about how both of that going to come in correlation with one another. Today, one of our data set today has been very challenging in that aspect, because right now, 99% of our data that we have existing that we are going to be able to reach in 2030, 99% is going to be AI generated. And how is that going to be challenged? We're talking the exploitation of data sets. So today, that is a lot of challenge, because I assume like a lot of you are working in the digital and technology aspect. And today, in order to be able to gain a data set that is unexploited, is relatively difficult. And a lot of industry are facing this challenge, either in creative industry, either in digital bot activity, in social media base. And all of that going to come to a challenge that how you're going to be able to access the data set, that to the point that could give you a reliable information and also unexploited by activity of this bot activity, including AI generated data set. And this is one of the concerns that going to come to a lot of businesses, as some of you are business owner. And that is something into a consideration. And that is also play part of the climate as well. Climate, when it comes to disaster, we want to make a fast response, real-time monitoring, and also real-time decision-making as well. And when it comes to exploitation of data, when a misinformation can spread like a Wi-Fi, and that is a certain challenge that's going to come into that aspect. The future is close. And there's one industry that I mentioned is untapped on the data exploitation of AI generation. AI is not a bad thing, it's a tool, and we are still using in our company as well. But one thing that's relatively important is you want to get unexploited data set. And satellite be able to achieve that. There is a drastic change in the trend in the lower Earth orbit satellites, and that is something we are working on. Satellite is one of the industry that unable to exploit it in the data set. The data is still clean, you still be able to using it, and also that licensing this kind of technology is also possible to be able to use using that reliable information that you'll be able to use. So today, 1,400 in 2021, increased 8 times to 8,000, and at the end of this decade, we're expecting to have over 60,000 satellites in the lower Earth orbit alone. This is one of the application outlook that we see in the image and Earth observation and satellite communication and all aspects into that is one thing that's play a very pivotal role in digital transitioning, because as the digital transition progress in the region, the more technology is advancing in the region, one thing that you want to get is the data. And artificial intelligence is only as good as what AI learned from. And I think this is play what a significant role when we understanding the industry about when you're working with data, especially a large amount of data set, you want to get the most unbiased data as much as possible. You want to be able to utilize it to make the most benefits and also be able to create a reliable new set of data that you'll be able to utilizing on. And that is one of the challenge. So that is something we are working on here at RIFFAI. So we are working from data collection and processing ourselves. We have our own satellite and also working on several satellites that are open source and also commercialized one. We're using this kind of remote sensing from CCTV, drone, weather station, weather radar, weather forecast. And all of that information are working all together with the GIS layer using analytical method. We developing our artificial neural network that be able to using that kind of untapped data set. The data that's unexploited, and also ensure that in the long run we could create a sustainable solution in the long run. So what are we working on is we detecting environmental change using artificial neural network and be able to detect that change in the satellite imagery. So we are integrating several satellites in our network from the US and also EU-based satellites. And then we gridding. We call it a gridding, increase the resolution, make it compatible with one another, that be able to decrease the marginal errors. And then with that high solution, we be able to see environmental elements that you can see on the satellite. We're talking about vegetation, water, normalized water, and all that's working in correlation with one another. When these kind of indicators change, it's changing in correlation with one another. For example, like if the green area decrease, the water is increased that higher than nominal water, there's a really high likeness that there's a flooding. Very simple, but at the same time, when you put more indicator like it, for example, land surface temperature, you'll be able to detect other aspects as well, like Wi-Fi, like drought, and other aspects that very important when you're managing your asset and operation. So we are working on our AI model training as well. That's why we be able to detecting this kind of change in the environment. We're using artificial neural network. We're talking about convolutional and recurrent neural network that working in image processing and classification. And we're using long short-term memory model for time series because when you're managing a satellite image, we're talking 1 million word of bandwidth of data that you have to be able to manage. And all of that need to have a really keen resource reservation and data control. We have a publication on that on data, so it's something that worth looking up after this as well. So we train our model, be able to detect environmental change, and that is some of things that we are working on. So today we are working on several projects across the world. But our focus still in Southeast Asia region. There's an event from flooding that just happened recently in Mekong as well. This is one of the aspects that we have the challenge because in Asia, especially in the Southeast Asia in particularly, we are facing climate hazard. It's a common thing for us, but it's going to get worse. To the point that this challenge is affect city, government, community, and also environment to the point that there is going to be beyond resilience. We might not be able to cover after that. We're tracking Wi-Fi in Indonesia and Malaysia as well. And this kind of challenge is going to be even more common. Flooding going to increase in terms of severe. It's going to come out in a wrong season, especially when in the region that we have a geopolitical challenge. We're talking about lack of collaboration beyond border. We're talking about China pressure in terms of our aspect of environmental demand. For example, the flood is not come alone from just a rain because a rain is not always enough to make a flood. But we're talking about the water retention, water release, upstream lie as well. And that is a several challenge that we are working extensively. We're working with Eastern Economic Corridor, helping make adaptation planning. So this is some of the case study that really worth mentioning about what we are working on. This is going to focusing on the water management. So one thing we're developing from the Mekong River Commission is early warning for flooding and water situation. So the challenge that we have in the Mekong region is when you have a flood, it's come in the wrong season, but it's not because of a rain. It's because the Chinese releasing the water. And today in China alone, we have 430 dams and 55 of them are mega dams. We're talking like a really big dam that happening in the region. And that kind of water situation is unable to track. Mekong River Commission put their effort for 30 years to be able to tracking this kind of water challenge and situation through international cooperation. And it's not success, of course, because our 430 dam, 2 of hydro information station giving information and incomplete data set to them. So how are we going to be able to work with this kind of uncompleted data set? That's why we have to get a new data set. And that's why satellite play into the role. Because you cannot put a hydro informatics station in China. They're not going to allow that for happening or using a drone or CCTV to do that. So one thing we can do is we're using satellite to do that. We be able to, using satellite, be able to capture upstream light, tracking the water situation. And that's Kai play a very important role, providing early warning for flooding and water situation. Another one is economic zone, Eastern Economic Corridor. Some of you might be familiar because some of you might gonna have an office there as well for the tax reduction, for the incentive that they do have. We are working with them for adaptation and planning because we've been talking about mass infrastructure, mass construction, or warehouses and industrial cluster that's block the regional water flow and the coastal change because it's next to the coast. So that's why they have a lot of challenge of flooding. Like I mentioned, today 80% of the city here in Southeast Asia are flooding a flooding challenge, and that's the reality of that. So when it's flooding come, they not be able to detect it using a that's why we need a station-less solution to be able to cover that. And That kind of concern is arising to the industrial, to the investor and businesses. So that's why that kind of matter is going to the National Water Office. So this is our technology pipeline. It's still a long way to go, but I think it's something worth mentioning about the technology transition in the region. Today we already done our AI research and model training. And in the future, in a very early future, any one of you that working on AI industry, we're gonna have a big challenge because we're talking about Microsoft, we're talking about OpenAI and Google. They already have a clean, unexploited, non-AI generated data set. We don't have that because everything that we are using right now, if it's our online data sets, if it's open source, we're gonna have a somewhat certain challenge that's gonna come to exploiting your data set that come from them. So I think that's one of the policy that Google have made. They already stopped a timeline before 2022, 2021. They say like, okay, this is the time period of Google that all the data source is untapped by AI. There's no a lot of AI generated image that large enough to be able to interrupt the information. OpenAI make that decision already, Google, Microsoft. And I think that challenges come to an entrepreneur, startups, businesses that still rely then on a data set. So I think this is a time in an era that we need to looking for an industry that be able to unexploited. We're talking about healthcare. You cannot AI generated a patient information. You cannot do that. You cannot AI generated a satellite image or satellite data set because that is something we can cross-check. And I think that's gonna play a very pivotal role about how you're gonna make a decision, because of course it's a digital transition. But at the end of the day, is your digital transition good enough, unexploited data set that well enough to be able to transitioning into the next phase of the development? So today we are working, piloting acquisition of project internationally, and we are working in the US, in the UK, Singapore, and also in Japan as well for our work, detecting this kind of environmental change beyond our border. We are Southeast Asian-based startup, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to work in the international cooperation to addressing this kind of climate and environmental challenges. We have partnership with satellite, because at the end of the day, when you work with satellite, you need to be able to have your own satellite. That's why you rely less on external data provider. And we are working with Singapore partner developing a paper battery. So we're gonna be the first group of people in the world launching a satellite power entirely on paper battery. And we, in the long run, we aim to position in strategic technology and space market growth. And one of the reasons is purely on the data. We want to be in an industry that's gonna be unexploited by AI generation, exploitation of data, and a distorted amount of data that in the data set. So we are a team of 50+ years experience. This is a bit that just want to showcase a bit about how we do things around here. I'm an AI engineer and GIS specialist. That's why a data set play a very pivotal role to us. I'm working with other aerospace engineer and robotics as well. So just to ensure that in our development, we be able to achieve our goal, working with a varied amount of data set. And we have our own AI team, our own satellite team, and that we are working in that direction to be able to achieve a varied challenge. I think like I always have a one word that to say to the people. You know, RIFFAI have one mission, and that mission happened to be to bring space down to Earth and make a prediction that would change the world forever. So that's RIFFAI for everyone. Thank you so much.